Let me introduce myself a little bit and kind of give you a bit of an outline of where this presentation is going to try to lead the conversation. First off, my name is Matt Brandt. I'm a QA engineer with the web QA team at Mozilla. The project that I'm going to talk about this evening is actually not my project. This is Sumo, or support.mozilla.com. This is the website that users will tend to go towards when they're looking for help when things go horribly wrong with products that we create, websites that we create, potentially even other products from other organizations that a user gets confused or stuck with, and they're reaching out for help. And so all of the material that I'm going to cover tonight, actually, I've borrowed from my colleagues on the project. Fortunate enough, actually, to have one of the project members, Eric Rose, is one of the web developers on the project, which is fantastic to have him here this evening. So let's begin. So continuous deployment on Sumo. And again, this is just one of many projects that we work on in the web team. As far as I know, this is really the only project that's working towards continuous deployment. Now, it's not really continuous deployment quite yet. And again, I'll get to this further in the slides. We're nearly there, or the team's nearly there. Oh, I forgot. A couple ground rules for this presentation. Since I have the mic, I want this to be people to feel comfortable interrupting, asking questions at any point. Now, I may defer the question until later in the presentation because I have a slide that I'll talk towards. But again, please feel free to ask questions at any point. And I know that I have a lot of time. Yes?
How are you defining continuous deployment?
How am I? Let's save that till the end, because I don't necessarily have a real answer, to be quite honest. So let's save that till the end. Any other questions, interruptions, geek moments? Okay, so let's begin. So I want you to first start out, and so this is Pippi Longpug, and I was looking through the documentation for Sumo, and as the team was looking at the current process and considering going towards what they come to define as continuous deployment, they came out with a bunch of questions that they had, concerns. Some of the concerns were pretty interesting, but I want you to kind of have some questions that you carry with you through the presentation. Now, these aren't questions that I necessarily have answers for, but again, I thought it was interesting that the team very explicitly explored their concerns that they had towards going. So the first one is, Sumo was already a pretty agile project, I guess, if you want to use terms. If I understand correctly, it was a 1 or 2 week iteration, so why would they want to move to something that is potentially multiple times a day when they're already doing small change sets, small deltas? What does continuous deployment mean? Does this mean that we're actually, as testers, going to trust the developers to write all the tests? What does this mean for our Selenium test suite? Lastly, and this one I kind of find interesting, is so if we're going to trust the developers to write all the tests and we're not sure what's going to happen with our Selenium test suite, what does this mean for us as testers? Are we going to become manual testers only? And it's a difficult thing. I had trouble actually putting this bullet point up because I don't think manual testing is inherently bad. I think we provide a lot of value because of our natural tendencies to explore applications and understand user behavior and to put that in our test cycle. But to say that we only are going to be manual testers, what does that mean? Are we going to become just manual testers? Again, these are questions that I actually found on the wiki. These are online, and I have links that you can follow that have more questions that the team kind of brainstormed. Let's see. And lastly, how do we measure quality? What is quality? Saying what is quality to begin with is already difficult, but what does it mean? How are we going to gauge that? So kind of the next step is let's kind of look at some of the history of the project. So where is this project first coming from before we talk about where it is current day? So a little bit of history. So QA, You do not have QA approval. This is actually the manager of Web QA for Mozilla. This is Stephen Donner. Typically, QA, whether we like to believe it or not, has a tendency to go towards kind of this gated process where we're kind of gatekeepers. We say yay or nay, that this goes forward from dev to staging to production, and we say that this QA verified, the push to production, went well. We take that responsibility. While again, I think at Mozilla, my experience has been that we really aren't a gating process. There's still a little bit of the semblance of, we do say in our bugs, when there's a push bug that says push this to production, the QA does sign off and on that bug and says QA verified, and I did yada, yada, yada to verify this release is golden. So as mentioned, short iterations, 1 week. Now let's look at a really simplified kind of workflow. So this is pretty generic. I think this is pretty generic between our projects now. But at the beginning, we had a development environment, staging, and production. Now, on the development environment, when new features landed, so when developers wrote some code, the code passed their unit tests, their breakpoint tests, it got pushed on to dev. So as QAs, we, on this project, would manually verify. We're, of course, as QAs, we're asking, is this the right thing? Did we actually accomplish the goal of this new feature, this regression fix? Is it going to delight our customers, our users? Is it adding value to the product? We might automate, so we might write some Selenium tests. We may defer those Selenium tests because we don't have time, but we'll write up a user story to implement those Selenium tests. I also, when I say automate, I include developer level tests. There can be a lot of disagreement between what the unit test is, but developer tests. Now, when QA, again, verifies and says this is golden, we push it to, oh, I went too far. When QA verifies it, we ask IT, we say, IT, please push this, push it to the stage so we can do some more verification. At this point, we do some regression tests. We may do some focused exploration on the application in areas that we think there might be some high risk, some integration tests. And again, we're always asking, is this the right thing? Are we really creating the right product? At this point, again, QA says verified. Magically, it's verified. And at this point, while we're doing this, the development team is already working towards the next release, or maybe like 3 releases out already. They're already beyond us. And so this may become a bit of a lonely place to be as a QA. So once we verify this, we push it to prod, and prod begins to follow the same thing. So we have to actually ask IT to do a push. We verify. I won't go into the depth of what we verify, but we verify, and again, we say this is great. We've done this. Let's do the next iteration. Let's do some planning. We'll do the next iteration. So this is, again, a very simplified viewpoint, but this is kind of the process that, as I understand, Sumo was following before the team began to explore. Ken first.
On your stage, who's using the stuff on the staging server?
Who's using stage?
Is it strictly QA?
Yes.
Or is it being used as an alpha or beta type test?
At this stage, before continuous deployment, typically just QA. So, yeah, good question.
What was the cycle time with this model?
Eric?
Couple months.
Couple months. So what was the question was, what was the cycle time? And a couple months. I like this picture. I know it's been circulating, but to me it represents, it's time to start trying out some new costumes, some new ideas to iterate, to see what works, what doesn't. I am an agile proponent personally. I don't like the term agile. I just think it offers some good potential development practices that you can use or not use, depending on the situation of the team. But with continuous deployment, it really means that we have a tool set. And I know that the audience here tonight wants to talk about tools. We like writing code, we like the tools, but there's also an attitude adjustment that goes along with this, that the team has to has to get to a point where they're understanding what the risks of the project, or the risks of certain features not working. What happens when X fails? Are we willing to allow X to fail? And so there's kind of this discussion that needs to happen, and it's identifying where the potential risk areas are and then starting to label the risk. And so you need to tear into your projects where they currently are. And so with Sumo, as I understand, the team did an in-depth look at their tests the developers looked, looking at what the Selenium tests were covering, finding, in many cases, lots of overlap where the tests were actually testing the same paths. And so there's a lot of duplication. In a lot of those instances, the developer tests were running faster than the Selenium tests because Selenium tests can be expensive to run. But really taking a close look at the project and where it's at. This also means starting to assign risk areas. Now, again, I recommend you go look at the wiki, and I have, or the wiki, go look at some of my links, but there was a whole list of areas that the team identified that they had concerns about and that they needed to kind of prioritize the concerns and put them into buckets. One of the areas that they said, well, is, so if we have risk, and these are areas that we're a little bit less concerned about, that they can actually fail. We're okay if a feature goes out to production and it fails, and we're actually so confident with this risk or the outcome of this failure that we're going to let it just fail. We're not going to write automation. Failure, of course, is time boxed, and so the team identified 1 hour. So when a feature goes out, if it fails, or I shouldn't say feature goes out necessarily, but if a regression occurs, it can fail for a certain time period before it gets fixed. Now, you may ask, well, okay, we don't actually test for this regression. We don't have it automated. How do we find out if it failed? For Mozilla, that means getting feedback from our users, and it means building out a feedback system that users can quickly say, hey, something went horribly wrong. Please fix this. And it comes to the attention instantly to the development team. So an example of this, so again, I've been talking about Sumo. So Sumo is a support website. Users log in, they can search for answers, the problems that people have had that may be like their own. They can post cries for help, very real cries. For many of us that in QA, we understand our user base, and it can be extremely frustrating. One of the areas that they said that the risk is low, so less critical, we're not going to automate, is that so a user can leave a question. They can leave a cry for help, but it's okay if the system that allows people to actually leave a message to help this person fails. We're actually okay with that failing for a finite or a boxed amount of time. To kind of visualize this, here's, I hope people can see this. This is something I pulled off of a support site last night, and it's a person who's trying to log into their Mozilla account. They've tried Firefox, Google Chrome, even Internet Explorer, and it's failing because they're getting this error message saying something about security certificate has expired. You can't log into your account. That little circle is where it says, well, no one's actually replied to help this person. Now, I'm sure you're asking, did I then help this person? But so if we click on the no replies, we get this next screen, and you can go in and help this person. There's this box at the bottom, and it's a little bit hard to see in this lighting, but you can leave a reply to this person to try to help them. The team defined the risk that this is okay if this fails. I find that incredibly intriguing to actually rank useful features on the site and say that these can fail for a certain amount of time because we're time boxed with our energies and our focus. So let's talk a little bit about the manual strategy. And again, I promise I'm going to get to some automation. But so manual strategy, yak shaving, this is a mountain goat. So no mountain goat shaving. We don't want to do repetitive tasks. We want to use kind of our powers of creativity. Now, this is a friend of mine this is his first time ever going tide pooling. This was a really neat event for him. And again, to me, exploratory testing is incredibly valuable, whether it's directed, where there's a story that you're following, that you're trying to complete, or if it's completely undirected. And I think there's a lot of value in it. And so the manual strategy for this particular project was actually quite simple. Oops, again, I went too far. Very simply, when new features land, they'll be manually verified. Yikes. There we go. When new features land, they'll be manually verified, and we'll do exploratory testing. Additionally, testing can occur on production. It doesn't actually have to be, so a new feature doesn't have to be verified on stage. Lastly, community involvement. So when a new feature goes out, when we say community, and this is actually maybe an interesting distinction, and I think it's important to identify this because I do work for Mozilla, and we are an open source organization, and all of our projects are open source. And so when I say community, to me that means I may be a paid community member, but we have many, many, many community members who are unpaid, who are volunteering their time, and they're doing this because they enjoy it. So testing can actually occur on a community level. So community can actually verify the features. The QA that's the lead on this project doesn't actually have to verify the features. Now for you, that may mean if you have a feedback system or feedback loop that users can say, this doesn't look right, they can get that feedback to you. If you identify that that's a risk that you're willing to take on the project. And again, the team has to identify that. So that's very simply, it's really kind of 3 bullet points, but that's the manual strategy for Sumo. And as I understand, that's where it stands right now. The automation strategy is a little bit more interesting because, again, let's start looking at some code or the tooling that we use. So this is a pretty straightforward Selenium test. It's hard to see. I don't want you to read it too closely. I don't want you to worry about it. But this test is simply making sure that a user can post a question, that the ability to post a question works. Again, that can't fail, so it's been automated. Now, the thing that's interesting that you should look at is this is a PyTest test. And so PyTest gives us PyTest markers, or in other languages, you might be familiar with decorators. And we can identify which suites of tests this particular test should be run in. And so it's important to identify what these tests, where they should be run. So the automation strategy on our end for Selenium is pretty simple. We're going to automate areas that are, and I like this, Eric actually used this word today, clumsy, that if it's clumsy to automate something using unit tests, or for Sumo, since Sumo uses jQuery, QUnit, and the team identifies that this should be automated, that the risk is high enough, that this can't fail, do it in Selenium. Any Selenium tests that go into the suite are automatically, they qualify as deployment blockers. Now, currently Sumo doesn't have hooks into the Selenium build, so manually someone verifies that the Selenium tests are passing. But the long-term goal is to actually put the hooks in and absolutely make it a deployment blocker. Tests can run in dev and staging, and even talking to the team today, a few of the team members are comfortable with saying, we'll just run the tests on production. We're that comfortable with our current test set. And at least for this project, as I understand, the team doesn't want tests running against production that write or delete data. So non-volatile tests. Now lastly, and this is the bit that Stephen hinted at, is that I really like this bullet point, and I know it's kind of low on the screen, so I'll read it. All tests will be deleted if they don't cover critical areas. Sumo had quite a few tests, as I understand, before they started moving towards continuous deployment. And for the team, they decided to delete test coverage. They deleted tests, which I thought was pretty brave. But again, it was understanding where the risk areas were and doing a thorough risk analysis.
What's the process for vetting those risks?
The process for vetting the risks, Eric might want to interject, but as I understand it, so the question was, what's the process for kind of vetting the tests to see which get deleted and which stay? And I think that goes back to the risk areas. And so risk isn't defined by me as the QA. I don't say, this is risk, this is the blocker, this has to work. It becomes a discussion with all the product owners of that particular project.
Are you saying it's a consensus?
it's a bit of consensus. Yeah. Okay, so some of the tooling. So again, this picture is horrible. So let's kind of blow it up a little bit. So this is a Django-based project. We're using a tool called Waffle. It's called no waffling. But the notion simply is putting flags on features. And so you can, or the team can turn on features, turn off features.
For flipping stuff.
It's for flipping, yeah, you can flip a feature on. You can flip a feature on for a very specific group. So let's kind of, this is going to be even worse. Well, you can kind of see that. So this is a private messaging. And this was a picture taken today. And it looks like private messaging is only activated for super users. And I know I'm not a super user on this project. But you can very specifically flip the bit for specific groups of people. You can actually add specific users if you want to test a feature to do a bit of a dark launch. It's again, I'm kind of giving this part of the presentation because I don't fully understand the capabilities of this tool. I think it's phenomenal. I'd like to see it on my projects. So the ability to do small launches, small releases, test out new features that are high risk. Next bit is using StatsD and Graphite. I was talking to Eric about how the team and the QA lead and trying to understand how they're using these graphs currently. And the team kind of led me to believe that they feel like they're underutilizing it. They're not quite sure how they want to use it fully to its potential. There aren't any thresholds set. So if throughput or the number of processes jumps, the memory usage spikes. An example of a spike was this. This is the spike is the number of CPUs, and it looks like about 8 CPUs went offline, and then it came back. But monitoring services. The questions between Waffle and StatsD and Graphite, I think there'll be quite a few, and I'm glad Eric's here. So this is kind of going towards the wrap up, but as I understand Sumo currently is, so on the trunk branch, automation, so automation again loosely defined as unit tests and Selenium tests are running. It's happening so fast that talking to the QA lead that she really doesn't look at dev any longer. She worries about stage. And so code's getting integrated so fast that she doesn't pay attention to it on dev. I say early stage testing, every 15 minutes, stage is auto-updated. Right now, again, there's no post-commit hooks. Bug and feature testing, go ahead.
But there should be.
But there should be. But there should be. There's no, so bug and feature testing is occurring on stage. And then as it stands, there's no big red push button. There's still the need to involve IT to get them on the phone, or in our case, via a push bug, an IRC. Automations run on production. Monitoring occurs. Rebecca, who's the lead, was saying that, again, monitoring, this is becoming a theme in the conversation, but we're not utilizing monitoring to its full potential. But she looks at monitoring after pushes occur to see what changes have occurred. I talk about involving the community on those risk areas where we're okay with failure occurring. The team still needs to develop a feedback tool to allow users to report when something has gone heinously wrong. And then, of course, we celebrate when production is up and live.